The new Metaspeed Edge Paris is one spicy super shoe. It's exactly the ingredient you need to take your next race into PR territory. It's ridiculously light, extremely breathable with a highly responsive midsole and a gait-specific carbon plate. You know how the saying goes, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the shoe. I'm kidding, but the Edge Paris is the lightest shoe most people own. It's the first thing you'll notice, nearly an ounce lighter than the previous version. Only 6.4 ounces or 180 grams for my size 8.5 US. In your hand, it's like holding a dried guajillo pepper. It's that light. The weight reduction starts with this Motion Wrap 2.0. It's a material that kind of reminds me of an onion sack. It's durable and lightweight and ultra breathable, but it's not scratchy to the touch. And like all Asics, based on my experiences so far, the build quality is excellent despite being mass produced. You can tell they really put every penny into the details. I point this out because with super shoes easily heading north of $200 these days, you really can't say the same about some of the bigger brands. You're paying extra for their marketing and their athletes. They really don't give a crap about their finished quality. Anyway, like a true race day shoe, your foot doesn't slide into these shoes like a well-greased pan. Okay, last food reference. But that's not unexpected. Because of this flimsy microfiber-like tongue, which is not gusseted, you really have to fuss with it a little bit to make sure the tongue lays flat. Once you're locked in, however, it stays put thanks to the well-designed laces. They're thin and they have these little nubbins that run along the side. It helps keep them from slipping back and forth while you're running. The shoe is mostly narrow from the midfoot all the way down to the heel. The front is actually quite roomy. I thought the extra space was poor design, but after running in these, I really feel like the extra room balances out the rocker design. With your toes in an upward bend, there's a lot of room for your little piggies to wiggle around. But don't worry, it feels very natural. Except there's one little thing that worried me, the high arch. It felt like there was a bump here pushing up against my arch. I was kind of sweating it, but as soon as I started running, the foam actually kind of compressed and it didn't bother me at all. In fact, it felt like the midsole was conforming to my foot. On my later runs, I still noticed that high arch when I stepped into the shoe, but after the initial mile or so, the feeling went away, so it's definitely not anything to worry about. And because the midsole is so light, this upper really sticks the platform to the bottom of your foot. I find in most shoes, I get a tiny gap between my foot and the insole as I run. You know, due to various reasons like the stiffness or the weight, but not in these. However, is it uncomfortably close? Maybe that depends on the outside temperature. So what exactly is stuck to the bottom of your foot? Well, there's 39.5 millimeters of foam in the heel and 34.5 in the forefoot. Oh, and by the way, this is a brand new midsole. What used to be FF Turbo is now FF Turbo Plus in the Paris version. What that means for us is that it's softer and lighter with even more energy return. I never had a chance to run in the Edge Plus, so I can't attest to it, but the general consensus is that the FF Turbo Plus does feel softer. For me, it's not quite as unbridled as, for example, the Hoka Cielo X1, but there's definitely a little English on here. But wait, there's more to this midsole than others, and that has to do with the design of this carbon plate. As you know, there are two versions of the super shoe. The Sky is meant for those bounding runners, and the Edge is meant for those with higher cadence and who have a tendency to heel strike, like me. I went by what Asics recommends and chose the Edge. One day I'll splurge and get both versions for your reviewing pleasure. So the Edge is supposed to help heel strikers lengthen their stride, which is why the plate is much more scooped. If you follow this outer decal, you'll see that the curve is much more pronounced in the mid to forefoot compared to the Sky, which is relatively flat. This purportedly takes advantage of the heel strike and rolls your foot forward. Snooze fest, right? But hear me out. In general, I found that to be true. Here is where I encountered a little discrepancy. It felt like a breeze starting at easy paces. You really get that unfettered sensation because of its ultra lightweight. If you were ever curious what it feels like to run without shoes, I think this comes pretty close. What in the hell does that mean? It means you get really good turnover. You feel the rocker pushing you forward with each step, and you feel the assistance that it gives you. At the same time, it made it harder to lock into a pace because my feet wanted to move faster than I was used to. That's not a complaint. It's just that the experience is not fantastic or surprising. However, when you push the pace a little faster to at least marathon pace, suddenly the shoe comes alive. The reason being, I start to strike a little closer to the midfoot, and boom, that's what this shoe is tuned for. Landing on the midfoot and forward, you feel an even more noticeable pop because suddenly you're landing on where there's the most foam placed above the plate. Your efficiency increases and it feels even more propulsive. And therein lies the problem that I have to come to terms with in this shoe. Despite it being billed as helping heel strikers, I don't think that gives you the entire picture. Because as I transitioned from faster paces down to easy paces, the design felt like it was actually more of a hindrance. This scoop becomes sort of a hump, and if you're not carrying enough velocity going into it, it feels like you're being tipped over the top instead of being shot forward. For that reason, I really don't think the Edge is necessarily catered to heel strikers, but there's more. I think it has to do with the extremely narrow heel, and softer isn't necessarily better for everyone. I don't think the slim heel really benefits us heel strikers in general. This shoe may work really well for higher cadence runners, but in addition, there's a greater advantage if you happen to be a mid-foot striker or you're pushing faster paces. So in my current state of fitness, this narrow heel really prevents me from using this beyond the half marathon distance. On my longer runs, I felt stress on the outer edge of my left foot just below the ankle. It felt like I'd been running on a cambered surface, and it just aggravated that peroneal tendon as it's constantly trying to stabilize that foot. It's really unfortunate because I was excited at the thought of a bespoke shoe for my type of running. And I don't think it had anything to do with the outsole. It felt really secure. But then again, it's been very dry here in Southern California, and I run basically only on cement and asphalt. The only real concern that comes to mind is durability. The rubber is quite thin under the heel. I think it's pretty much the same thickness as the forefoot, but it's further embedded into the foam. Not sure why, because if you're putting it out there that this shoe helps heel strikers, maybe it's a good idea to add a little more rubber in that area as well. Anyway, this isn't a shoe that you want to wear on a daily basis. You should really save it for those race days and faster sessions. Overall, I respect Asics' approach in designing a shoe based on a runner's gait, because let's face it, some of us run like gazelles. I don't. And it's great to be able to buy a shoe that's already tuned for half the runners out there in this world, right out of the box. Despite that, this is definitely one of those shoes that I personally have to work up to, because currently I'm not physically able to maintain good form over the length of an entire marathon. The great thing is that I can see the amazing potential in this shoe when I eventually do get there. For the seasoned long distance runners, this will definitely help those with a tendency to heel strike reach their personal best. For me, I admit it, the spice is a little too hot to handle. I couldn't help one last food reference. Ride or run, let's get it done.